two, 1, 2, 3.
There are books that are good, there are books that are bad. There's some books so fucking awful you wish you never had read them at all. Cause a novel can ruin your life. Hey buddy, I don't even own a television.
Alright, welcome to I Don't Even Own a Television, a podcast about bad books. I am your host, J.W. Friedman, and with me today, live from Brooklyn, New York, is Ben Firke.
Hello, how you doing?
I am doing great. How are you?
Real good, real good. It's a little chilly here, but sun's out, so can't complain.
That's cool. Awesome. Ben is a playwright and a copywriter and a generally funny guy. And we have gotten together today to exhaust his personal expertise on the subject of Red Hot Chili Peppers folklore as we discuss Anthony Keidis' autobiography, Scar Tissue.
Yep, it's a real classic. It's sort of like I sort of joked on Twitter earlier that it should have been called the JV Basketball Diaries.
Yeah, totally.
Because it's got that kind of just constant sort of just drugs and sex just happening nonstop to a young sort of pseudo artist, but without all the literary pretension that actually made Basketball Diaries a little better.
Yeah. This is kind of like Basketball Diaries being narrated to you by someone who read it like in high school and forgot half of it.
Exactly.
Yeah, so when I actually discovered that this book existed, I decided I needed to do an episode, and I actually went and just started soliciting guests, and you came forward and told me that you were once the member of some kind of fan club thing called Flea Mail.
I wasn't really you didn't have to be a member, because it was basically sort of Flea's personal blog before blogs got really big. But when I was like a young man, growing up in the middle of Connecticut, we didn't really have much in the way of culture, so bands like the Chili Peppers kind of had like an outsized presence, and I was a big music nerd. I liked bass, so therefore I liked Flea, therefore I was on board with everything they did. And he had this sort of thing called Flea Mail, where he would post these weird, rambly, just entries in this sort of journal kind of thing from a tour. It actually pulled some of them up, and it looks like if you really need to just Google it and see it, because it looks like an E.E. Cummings poem or something, and it just reads like, "Hi, we just played in Paris tonight. I love to see people smile. I stayed in my room all day because I needed to rest. I know it is lazy, but it was time for abject laziness. And last night, I watched Flight Plan with Jodie Foster. It was kind of interesting and a little predictable, but I just love Jodie Foster. I always have." And it goes on like this, just pages and pages.
Flea was the original weird Twitter.
Yeah.
I like to imagine him writing this while wearing his pants that are covered with stuffed animals.
Or when he went through the tighty whities underwear phase, where he would
Yeah, Flea's rocking some Jordans and some Hanes briefs and watching Flight Plan and enthusiastically blogging about it. Okay, yeah, we should get down to business here. So before we get started, even though this is an autobiography, the subject goes on quite a journey, so let's start off here with plot in 60 seconds.
Nobody knows if you finish or not. You got 60 seconds to give them the plot. Plot in 60 seconds.
So this segment is what it sounds like. Basically, you will have 60 seconds to summarize the plot for our willing and ready audience. So are you prepared?
I am ready.
Okay, well then, give it away now.
Okay, so Anthony Keidis is a young man. He grows up in Michigan and Hollywood, California. He turns 12 and he has sex as brokered by his father and his father's girlfriend. And then he does drugs because his father is a drug dealer and has access to all kinds of cocaine. And then basically he has sex, he does drugs, he has sex again, he does more drugs. He does more drugs. He has some sex. He throws a little more drugs in there. Eventually, he forms a band called the Red Hot Chili Peppers, which had some success. And but he continues to do drugs and have sex with just an endless stream of women, both famous and not. Eventually, the band gets good. He gets sober for a little while, and it's sort of we're given a reprieve from just the constant just melee of drugs and sex we're subjected to. And then he relapses, and then he gets clean again, and then he relapses, and then eventually, then he just sort of gets clean, and then that's the end of the book, more or less. That's the entire plot of this book.
That's pretty much
music is played. And
there's a little more drugs and sex than you mentioned.
Well, I didn't want to take up the whole 60 seconds with that. It's just...
No, I'd say like the first 4 or 5 chapters, especially, like reminded me a lot of Too Short's Freaky Tales, where it's like, I met a girl named Pam. She likes to do this, and that's kind of like the extent of his descriptions of his social interactions. Are like, I met this girl named something or other who had pink hair and really big boobs, and then she gave me a blowjob. Next chapter.
And like so much of it is because like it's bizarre, like just how many times he has to like describe these like sexual encounters, because he's Anthony Keidis. He is by all accounts a fit, handsome young man who is the lead singer of one of the most popular rock bands in the world. It's a safe assumption this guy's going to get laid. I don't understand why he had to keep reinforcing that point that he was like the master of the puss. Because it's just sort of like, it's just an assumption you can make,
Yeah. No, I mean, honestly, though, I think, like, if you could crack open Anthony Kiedis' skull and, like, see visualization of the contents, it would entirely be just like boobs, because I don't even think he's like reiterating this to prove anything. I think that like this is probably heavily edited. I should mention he has a co-author, and I'm sure that there's tons more of this that got left on the cutting room floor.
Well, I looked up his co-author. Sorry to interrupt. I looked up his co-author, and he is the guy who was sort of responsible for a bunch of Howard Stern memoirs. So,
yeah,
and so I feel like that, like, instead of like maybe cutting that stuff, I think he may have, encouraged sort of Anthony to overshare even more, because maybe that's what
possible.
That guy's into. I don't know.
I kind of got the impression that this is just like, if you sit down to have a conversation with Anthony Kiedis about his past, it's mostly going to be like a list of drugs he took and like crazy sex things.
Some of which are vile and downright illegal. In most jurisdictions in this country.
Yeah, and there's the really creepy element of his dad throughout the whole thing, and I don't want to go to the dark places, but while there isn't anything actually that sounds technically abusive described, his father was involved in his sex life from a very young age in, like you mentioned earlier, kind of brokering things, and he was always dating younger women that Anthony would end up hooking up with and stuff, and that is pretty creepy.
Yeah.
It probably explains a little bit of the weirdness of his relationships that followed, for sure.
And what's bizarre about it is that so for the people, I guess, who haven't read the book, what happens when young Anthony becomes a man, he basically his father, who's like, I think at this point got to be at least like in his early 30s, is dating an 18-year-old girl, and they're living together in Hollywood, and Anthony writes this little note, like, Dear Dad, I really want to know what it's like to have sex with a girl. I was wondering if I could have sex with your girlfriend. Let me know, okay? Thanks. And like it's like his Christmas note. It's like he's asking for girls on his wish list, and his father's basically like, yeah, sure. And this girl is totally on board with deflowering a 12-year-old boy who has no idea what the hell he's doing, and it's just. But what's weird is that he doesn't really regard this as being weird or like non-normative in any way. It's just like oh yeah, no, it was awesome. Like she had huge tits. It was so fun. Like,
yeah, that's what really kind of creeped me out too. Is that it's really presented as just like, oh yeah, this is a thing that happens, and that it was so sleazy and weird. It creeped me out a lot.
It was super creepy. And then he and sort of the first 20% of the book is sort of fun, because it's definitely the most fun part of the book, because he's definitely telling all these weird stories about like getting a blowjob in the bathroom of his high school and stuff. There's also this sort of fun kind of, it's almost like Huck Finn, if like Huck Finn would every now and then like shoot coke and then party with his dad or something. Because it's like he's like this young like ruffian. He like makes friends and gets in fights, and he's like a latchkey kid. He gets to travel all over LA and get in trouble and jump off buildings into pools and eventually break his back doing that. So that's sort of like the fun, but like all of the stuff with his father really kind of darkens it.
Yeah, for sure. And like you mentioned earlier, I think the weird thing about, or not the weird thing, but what really sticks out is how kind of innocently he regards it, like even to this day. But Yeah, I don't know. In addition to all the fucking creepiness, there is a lot of fun, like you were talking about. A couple points when he was describing his childhood, I had trouble believing it. And I don't know if this is like a huge dick move to say or anything, but like there are points when, especially the good times of his childhood, that read as completely fictitious to me. Like, you know, like basically he and his buddies are going down to the watering hole, you know, or sorry, the fishing hole with their bindles, and they're gonna like have some mayonnaise sandwiches and like go see a dead body or something. Like,
he definitely has like this, yeah, like a very kind of like, God, I'm thinking of that 80s, what's the Stand By Me, like the 80s movie with the kids and they, you know, they get lost in the woods. There's definitely a very, when he's living in Michigan, he definitely kind of has this sort of rustic, outdoorsy kind of thing going, which just seems like a little too good to be true.
Yeah, you know, like he's always one step away from like talking about pushing hoops around with a stick or something. It just doesn't ring very, very real to me. But I find also that a kind of an ongoing theme of reading this for me was grappling with what I consider to be Anthony's credibility problem.
Yeah.
So.
Basically, early, you know, like about 20% of the way in, he sort of eventually talks about me, you know, forming the band, and it's almost like he's sort of subtweeting or trying to send like these little messages to his bandmates. Like he'll talk about Flea, you know, and like the whole Chili Peppers mythos is based on Anthony and Flea are these brothers, and like,
yeah,
you know, the first time they met, they got into a fight, and then realized like, no, we're better off as friends, and they've been like friends for life, and they have this like telepathic connection and on stage and stuff. But he also he'll kind of like, so he'll definitely kind of play that up a little bit and then kind of, you know, just talk really negative about Flea and kind of, and sort of say like, yo, he was, you know, kind of like an idiot about that. Like he talks about like Flea, like showing up with this, you know, Playboy with all, or something in the summer with all the pages stuck together. And it's like, really,
yeah,
you're going to bring that up? You know?
Yeah, like
it's like he's like making like, you know, the best man speech and he doesn't know when to stop with like all the embarrassing shit. Like, oh, and then back in Vegas, man, you know, and it's just like, why do you gotta, you know, sort of do that? And I think a lot of his credibility comes from, or credibility issues comes from, he's sort of, you can tell, it's almost like he's like trying to play band politics through the book.
That's very
like,
true.
This is the way it is, man, and now it's public knowledge, and everyone will have to think that too, because I said it, you know.
Well, in my notes, I had described like pretty much a huge one, like at least 100-page chunk of the book as the John Frusciante as an asshole section.
Yeah.
Because it seems to exist for no other reason than for Anthony to just be like, and then John did this, and he said this, and he's such a dick, and he didn't care about our fans. And like,
it's getting
just
more
goes on and on.
Stuff. This is like when Anthony's sober, right, and John Frusciante is like falling into heroin addiction or whatever, and he keeps on basically being like, John was being all moody and withdrawn, and he was only hanging out with his girlfriend that he did drugs with, and it's like, dude, that was literally the last 10 years of your life. Like,
yeah.
He talks about, you know, how he would, in like 1985, like show up to rehearsals just stone out of his mind on heroin and just pass out in the corner and leave the rest of the poor band to kind of just sort of, you know, figure shit out on their own, or just wouldn't show up at all. And it's just like, and it's all about, man, I was really just, you know, I was in a bad place, and he talks about the addiction and everything. And then John Frusciante has the exact same problem, and it's like, what an asshole, you know, why is he being all moody and shit? And it's like,
yeah,
you of all people should know, Anthony. Like, this is...
yeah, there's
just a little bit of empathy would be nice.
Yeah, there's a distinct lack of empathy. And you know, I noticed what you were mentioning earlier too about kind of the weird kind of subliminal diss going on. I really noticed this too, to the point where one of my notes I wrote that like, it seems like Anthony Keidis is kind of an awful friend. And like, from all accounts, like even in this book as well as elsewhere, like Flea in a lot of ways in the early part of the group was the driving force of the band when it came to like, he had the scene connections and the musical talent, and you know, like it was the group was essentially his idea, yada yada. But like throughout the book, you know, Keidis kind of wavers between like portraying that stuff honestly and then trying to kind of turn Flea into this wacky sidekick character for himself. Yeah. And it doesn't seem very realistic at all, like when you actually look at, you know, the history of the group, even as he lays it out. You know?
Yeah, because it's weird, because it's sort of, you know, this is sort of a weird analogy to make, but it reminds me of kind of, you know, what those sort of like really conservative Republicans will say about the president. Well, they'll be like, on the one hand, he's this sort of like totally inept buffoon, and on the other hand, he's this controlling, like, crypto Nazi or whatever. And that's basically how Anthony keeps on portraying Flea as being, they talk about they have like a meeting with some like A&Rs or something from a record company or a producer, and they pass a spliff around, and like he makes a point of being like Flea was just passed out like in the middle of this super important meeting. But then later he'll kind of, what a joker. But like later he'll talk about how like Flea is basically the band Nazi, and the guy who kind of bosses everyone around, and is always like pressuring people to rehearse and stuff, and like and it really just seems like Flea is just doing the Paul McCartney thing where he's like, if no one's going to step up and be the boss, I'll do it because someone has to do it.
Yeah. I just it just really seems like Keidis really sees this as his story. Which, it's his autobiography, that's true, but I think that the impression I got, even just from the book, is that the Chili Peppers were not, the vision of one man, but he really goes out of his way to make sure that that's what you take from this. And, like, that seems so shitty to do to your bandmates.
Yeah.
Like,
it really
I don't know.
It's, and the other thing is that if, just sort of the way Anthony presents it, he's really kind of just along for the ride. Like, he is... in terms of like internal politics of the band, he is sort of the most passive lead singer I've heard of. He, for like most of the '80s, he's just sort of like is just high all the time, and then will like sort of show up in the studio with a bunch of like goofy raps and that he'll just sort of yell into a mic. And like only like later, very late in the career, does he sort of begin portraying himself as this artist. And yet it's still like he still sort of like clearly thinks that he's the leader of this band when he doesn't actually lead it at all in any real practical way.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, this is like a step away above, or pardon me, this is like a step away from like a bad drummer joke. Ugh. Okay. Let's start this little section over here. Okay, so this is like a step away from a bad drummer joke, but like I've been in rock bands in the past and stuff, and in many ways I feel like Anthony Kiedis really reveals himself to be like the stereotypical lead vocalist. Like all of the stereotypes surrounding dudes that sing and don't play instruments are always like, like, oh, they think they're hella important, but like they're the most replaceable guy, or like, but if you talk to them, it's always their band because they're the one on stage, even if they don't write any of the music and just write lyrics and yada yada. So like, I mean, he really kind of embodies that stereotype loudly and proudly, and like has absolutely no problem taking credit for everybody's contributions as his own, when like mostly what he did for a very long period of time in the group was be like, scattered a dee-bop, wee-bop, cops suck.
I mean, it's like that's in this, it's he really does like sabotage a lot. I find it okay, let me back it up. So I used to listen to this band a lot, and I'm, I like kind of indie shit too, like weird experimental, John Cage stuff. But I do have like a soft spot for like a bunch of, just sort of big mainstream rock bands, because like I just have good memories of listening to that with friends and stuff. But like, when I go back and listen to the Peppers, though, it's like Keidis always sort of ruins these like really like well-made, tightly wound, like masterfully done pop songs. Like, I don't know how familiar you are with like the whole catalog, but like in All Around the World, which is like the first song in Californication. Yeah. It's like it's got this, it really rocks and has like this funky like slap bass part in the middle. It's a totally fun song. And then in like one of the last choruses, he sings like, instead of the actual lyrics, he goes like ding dang dong dong ding dang dong dong ding dang, which is like, I don't know if he's being racist and doing like Chinese
a Mickey
people
Rooney,
talk or something, or if it's just like he forgot the words in the studio and like Rick Rubin's like, fuck it, just leave it in, bro. Like, it sounds great.
It's jazzy.
It's jazzy.
It's funny that you said that, because actually this is word for word a note I wrote earlier that as I was reading this, I was like, the Chili Peppers are a band that makes me wish that rock bands did instrumental versions of popular albums like rap producers do, because like so many of their songs would be great if it was just the music and not Anthony Kiedis rapping about how he wants to fuck a water buffalo.
Yeah, definitely.
Anyway, I think we should probably take a break here, and we'll be coming back in a little bit to talk more about the parts of this book that don't make me sad or incredibly uncomfortable. So stick around. Hey, welcome back to I Don't Even Own a Television. It's a podcast about bling-a-ding-a-ding-a-dong books. Today, we're discussing Scar Tissue, the memoir of Anthony Keidis, lead vocalist of the Red Hot Chili Peppers. And with me is Mr. Ben Firke.
Hello. Hello, Internet. How are you?
It's good to talk to you again. It's been so long.
Yep.
So,
It's
yeah.
been ages.
Basically, as we, pardon me. Basically, we've just been talking about the contents of this book. It's a memoir, so there's not really a lot of structure you can impose on it. There's definitely a narrative, but it's pretty straightforward. So I think we should probably just continue picking it apart piece by tiny piece.
It's a real deconstruction, if you will.
The first thing I wanted to do, though, is in the last segment I mentioned that I feel there's some credibility problems with this book. And there's two in specific that I wanted to call out. One of them, maybe, possible. The other is just absolute bullshit, and there's no way it's true. So in his younger years, Anthony describes impressing one of his teachers in high school, I believe, by explaining to him the origin of the word fuck.
I remember this part.
And he goes on to deliver it's an insanely popular urban legend that has to do with like some ship captain writing for unlawful carnal knowledge on someone's demerit sheet if they got in trouble for having sex outside of wedlock.
I've also heard it as fornication under consent of the king or something.
Yeah, and generally, like, that right there is enough to know you're dealing with bullshit, because if you hear, like, two conflicting stories about the same thing that are both generally accepted, it usually means people are just talking out of their ass. And there are a ton of other reasons that this isn't true, and I mean, I'm a nerd about linguistics. People who listen to this know. And the idea of acronyms forming words is something that didn't really happen until after World War II. Yeah. Like, that's when that entered the lexicon. There were definitely not people in the Middle Ages being like, oh, fornication under consent of the king. Fuck. You know, like, that would not have occurred to people.
It strikes me as a very Vietnam era kind of thing, you know, like Fugazi and Fubar and
Snafu,
you know, all that stuff.
It's definitely something that didn't become part of, you know, the English-speaking lexicon until at least the middle of the 1900s, and definitely, like, is distinctly American, too. So, but anyway, so in addition to that one kind of bugged me just because I was like, okay, well, you know, maybe he just was a kid who read that, and then maybe his teacher was really gullible and was like, wow, this guy's smart. But this one bugged me, and it talked about when he called Dave Grohl from Nirvana to ask him to open for them on tour. He claims that Dave Grohl, and I mean, this is said in no certain terms, that he tells him immediately, Anthony Keidis, we love you guys. We grew up listening to you in Seattle. Dave Grohl did not grow up in Seattle.
True. I missed
it's
that.
like anybody who's like followed his career at all. Yeah, he's actually from Virginia, but that DC scene. Yeah. And like he didn't move to Seattle until long after he had played with Scream. Like he was in his early 20s when he made that move. So that is not something he would say, and it just like it pissed me off because I was like, dude, leave other people out of your myth building. And like I'm sure there's probably some excuse, or he got him confused with somebody else or something, but still, like, that just bugged the hell out of me.
Yeah, so. Or that's something that you think that if they had the editor or the fact checker or somebody at whoever published this pile of shit, like, would have caught that or something, like, hey, wait a minute, like, this doesn't make it, you know, but I guess, you know, editors don't have like the same capacity for memorizing rock trivia that we do, so. Yeah,
that's probably it, or they just didn't want to step to Tony Flo.
Tony Flo. Which was
the original name of what became the Peppers was Tony Flo and the Miraculously Majestic Masters of Mayhem, which I added a note when I was writing in the margin. It says "blah" a bunch of times because that is the best.
Oh God. Yeah,
when I read it, I was like, man, I love high school kids. They're so hilarious. And then like I did the math and realized they were probably in their mid-20s at that point. So.
What was weird about it was you know, like this is a band that, you know, like is great if you're 14 years old and you're like, yeah, they have a song called "Party on Your Pussy, Count Me In. This is great." You know, like, and then, you know, I've kind of, you know, I'm not saying that I'm, you know, some super sophisticated, you know, I'm not, you know, Gary Stengart, to do a throwback to previous episodes of this wonderful show.
You're not doing a crazy accent. So.
But, like, I'm like a red-blooded, like guy like anyone else and stuff. And, like, you go back, and I go back, though, as, like, an adult, and I sort of read this, I'm like, oh, my God, no wonder I was so into him when he was 14. Like, he is, like, so fucking immature about anything to do with like women or any shit like that. It's just like to the point where like I'm not like a prudish guy or anything, but I was just like, would you just shut the fuck up about all the sex? Like
how many different words can you think of to like make a sly allusion to the fucking vagina? It's all like this fucking like Apache Rose Peacock kind of shit. Like, dude, come on. You're a grown man.
And oh god, and I thought that was, to get to like music stuff, like there's this bit where he goes on this huge sort of thing about the process of writing Californication and how they went through various different drafts of the song and stuff, and which is actually very unlike the band, because in like some Spin article on them I read, they're very methodical in how they make songs. Like they'll jam until they have like a basic kind of track, and then they write a bunch of words on a whiteboard. And then they, or like phrases, they pick one.
Whoa.
That's the name of the song, and then Anthony writes the lyrics based on whatever shit that they kind of brainstormed. And then
that's very, very postmodern. That's like some Brian Eno and Flood kind of stuff.
And they...
the John Zorn Cobra cycle.
Alvin Lucier,
yeah.
all that stuff. But like... Basically, so like, but one of the things that happens is that if a song doesn't really work after like 2 or 3 days, they basically just cut it. And so like for some reason, like Californication was like this. He wrote the lyrics first, and it was the one song he refused to let go. And he talks about how it's this huge like step forward for him, and he's like when Frusciante comes up with the chords for it, and basically all of the music, which makes the song great. Like the song's not good because of any of the fucking words, but
no.
and then he includes like the entire song, like the entirety of the lyrics, just printed out like it's his like it's poetry or something. And it's even then, it's like he just can't help himself with this like hardcore, softcore shit, like.
Yeah.
And this is his like mature, songwriting and stuff. Like this is him as like an evolved musician at this point.
Yeah. It's there's a line in the book that I wrote down specifically that was right around this era when I think it lets you get into the headspace that Anthony Kiedis was at this point in time, because he says, "Flea turned me on to an old Chinese acupuncturist named Zion."
I know this is going.
Which like this is like maybe 200 pages removed from like I shot heroin into my dick and then fucked a stripper. Like. Like, dude, and there's no kind of even inkling of awareness that this is like that's the interesting part of the story. It's like, look at where you ended up at this point from where you began. It's more just like he's all just like, yeah, matter of fact.
I mean, he's like just also one of the least sort of self-aware memoir authors I've read, just in all like just ever. Because there's this one amazing bit where he's talking about these two videos they make for One Hot Minute with the same director. And in the first one, there's this like 3-second bit or whatever where Anthony Kiedis and Dave Navarro, who was the guitar player at that time. By the way, fun trivia challenge: name all of the guitar players in the Chili Peppers, because they have like a Spinal Tap like inability to keep keep one guy. Anyway, so where like Dave Navarro and Anthony Kiedis make out for like a little bit in this video, and the label's apprehensive, and then he's like, well, if the label doesn't want it, it goes in, man. And he talks about how they lost a bunch of like frat boy fans and stuff, and he was like, you gotta thin the yokels out and stuff. And so he's sort of like in the first half of this page, kind of like, planting a flag for like, progressive kind of values or whatever, and being like, yeah, man, it's okay to be gay and stuff, And then, like, he talks about how in their next video, it's like got all these like Mexican strippers in it and shit, and he says like there was this woman executive from the label there, and she was a PC feminist, and like she got her panties in a twist over all of the nudity, whatever. And it's like, so he goes from being like, fuck frat guys, we're different, we're like mature, to being like titties. Just I'm a frat guy now in 100 words. It's
at risk of getting like a little too deep here, though. He does mention a bunch throughout it that he has just kind of a deep-seated problem with authority figures. You know, and so I could honestly see this as just being an expression of that. It's like somebody's telling me not to do this, so fuck them.
Yeah.
You know, not that it really has anything to do with a deep-seated political viewpoint either way, as much as like, fuck you. Like, you don't tell me what to do, you know?
He's like the only real political stance he takes at any point is like he's for free Tibet.
Yeah, and he
the
doesn't
Dalai
like
Lama told him
cops.
to be.
Yeah, Dalai Lama told him about Tibet, and he doesn't like cops because he discovered Grandmaster Flash when he was working as a liquor delivery driver. So this book contains what is kind of the platonic ideal of the white guy discovering rap story, which I love. It's Anthony when he was working at mid-ocean, driving a pickup truck filled with booze that he would deliver to bars, and he said it was the best job ever because he could just drive around and not give a fuck, basically.
And he could shoplift liquor from his employer.
Yeah, and he actually, like, he has some pretty clever schemes that he details, and I was impressed by that. But, yeah, so at one point he's doing this and he hears The Message by Grandmaster Flash, and it just turns into this ridiculous kind of, like, self-parody sort of thing, like, more than anything else, it got me to thinking these guys were all about writing rhymes and stuff. It's like, it was the first time I ever attempted rapping. and I don't know, I get a huge kick out of that because it's so, like, you hear that story so many times in so many shitty like rock biographies or pieces of music journalism that was like, oh, it was just a suburban guy listening to AC/DC, and then this dude drove by and Two Live Crew was bumping out the window and my life was changed forever.
It was so stripped down and raw, and the lyricism on display was awe-inspiring, and it could be about issues like on the street that mattered to me. And like, yeah, it really is
like parties on pussies.
Parties on pussies.
They do, yeah, as you mentioned before, the Chili Peppers do have a song called "Party on Your Pussy," and one of my favorite parts
is where he dedicates it to Sinead O'Connor.
Yeah, and it should be mentioned.
And she dates him for it.
Yeah, it should be mentioned. Yeah, he doesn't like dedicate it to her like she's not there, and he's like, I'm going to say this song is for Sinead O'Connor. They played a show with Sinead O'Connor, and he thought she was like super cool, and that the best way to get her attention was to go on stage and dedicate "Party on Your Pussy" to Sinead O'Connor.
And
that's one of my favorite moments in the book. And
set.
Yeah, she thanks him during the set. Pretty obviously, ironically, I would imagine. But once again, like this book is written without any concept of irony or sarcasm.
Just
and
none.
so you just get the impression that he's like, oh, wow, she really liked that.
And the other thing, though, about the Grandmaster Flash thing that I actually sort of took note of was what's weird is that he never actually mentions the things that actually kind of make him and the Chili Peppers sort of an important band in music, which is that they were really the first, or one of the first bands to mix like rock and rap. You know, obviously people like to talk about Run DMC and Aerosmith and, you know, like Faith No
the
More
one-offs
coming up at the same time and stuff, but like they were really the like Korn, like in the middle of like the horrible rap metal outbreak at the end of the 90s, you know, said like, we don't listen to the Beatles, you know, as far as we're concerned, music starts with the Real Hot Chili Peppers and Faith No More. And it's like, they actually invented or more or less invented a style of music that was sort of, you know, unheard of at the time. And so like this, I thought like when he's talking about Grandmaster Flash and he realizes that he can rap and bring that, you know, that'll be his sort of performance style. I was thinking, you know, maybe he would touch on that, or like, you know, what it must have been like to be playing, you know, rap rock in the 80s when no one knew what the fuck it was. And nope, it's just like he just sort of was like, Grandmaster Flash was cool, and, you know, you didn't have to be a good singer to be the lead singer of a band, and then that's sort of it. You know, he never gives himself credit for things that he actually
deserves
credit
for. It's one of the things that really jumped out to me later on in the book. Like, it's pretty far along the trajectory of the initial Chili Peppers career, and he says something like, it was strange to me. I was in the most popular punk funk band in LA, and I was still broke. But like at no point before that does he even mention that this like punk funk thing was a thing. You know, he doesn't talk about Faith No More. He doesn't talk about Fishbone or like like this scene that they were kind of a part of, you know, and it just comes from out of nowhere and he uses this term and you're like, what is he talking about? You know?
The only time he mentions Fishbone is when he gets mad at the keyboard player for fucking his girlfriend or something.
Yeah, and I'm
like once. After he cheats on her dozens of times throughout like the course of like a European tour he was on.
Yeah,
and like she sleeps with the guy from Fishbone once, and it's the end of the world for him.
Yeah, there's a lot of that kind of like, oh, you know, I was horrible to this girl, but then she made me break up with her by doing this thing. He doesn't mention Faith No More at all because I know like Mike Patton fucking hates him. And I guess they have like a pretty huge rivalry, and I'm sure that he was like all worried about, you know, stoking the fire there or something too. But like, it is weird that there was, like you said, like a scene that kind of sprung up around them that they were instrumental in creating, and it's completely ignored.
And the other thing that's weird is that he talks about how they were like a pretty big underground kind of college rock band, and they were big, you know, not just, or I mean, they weren't really huge in the United States, but they were like kind of big in Europe throughout the 80s. And he never really talks about how, like, what it was like to sort of be like, to sort of like break into this sort of like a very different culture with this very American, like, you know, overtly sexual, you know, very like at this time, like Flea is like basically playing slap bass in every song, so they're a very, you know, technically flashy band and stuff. He never really talks about how like they fit, like how what it's like for them to be adored by people who also love, like, you know, Jesus and Mary Chain and Joy Division and stuff.
He hates Jesus and Mary Chain.
He hates Jesus and Mary Chain. He talks about those guys getting their asses kicked by Cypress Hill, which
Ice Cube.
You know.
It was Ice Cube.
Or Ice Cube, that's right. Yeah. Oh, my God.
Yeah, I went and I tried to look it up, and I couldn't find anything about it, but I didn't spend a lot of time really digging either. But once again, credibility problems, you know. I'm just saying. Yeah. It's like, it kind of like boils down to like, these guys I didn't like were mean, and then they got beat up by my black friends. So.
And he definitely has, I mean, this is like in general an incredibly name-droppy book, beginning in like the first 25 pages where he talks about how, like, in order to go to this school in a different district, I pretended I lived at Sonny Bono's house.
Yeah.
And, you know, from Sonny and Cher. And he just keeps, and then he just does not stop, like, name-dropping all of these. Like, he has, like, a cameo in a Stallone movie when he's a child actor.
It was Fist, too, which is...
It was Fist. Oh, God. You know, and it's just, but he just cannot stop, like, mentioning other famous people, and it's either he's intensely sort of, like, complimentary, or he's very, you know, obviously he doesn't like Adam Horowitz and the Beastie Boys. He hates Courtney Love, you know,
yeah, to the point where, like, he says that the first time he meets her, she's like, yeah, I gave you a ride when you were hitchhiking once, and I was a stripper, and you owe me money. Like, I don't know, dude. I just don't know, you know?
He's, like, bringing up beef that's just so insignificant and outdated that it's just like, why are you wasting our time telling us about, like, this weird, like, you know, like, mild disagreement you had with Ad Rock, which may or may not have been influenced by the fact that he you know, married Ione Skye after he broke up with her.
Yeah, and beyond that, may or may not be true. Like, I hate to keep coming back to this shit, but, like, the Courtney Love thing, I read that, and I was like, oh, really, though? Like, this really happened, huh? I'm sure. Like, oh, I'm just meeting Kurt Cobain for the first time, and he's in this band that's getting insanely popular, and what do you know? His girlfriend is an ex-stripper that used to give me hitchhiking rides and thinks I owe her money. Like, I don't know, man. I just, like... sorry.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of, I think, embellishment going on here, if not just outright making shit up. Or, and you know, I don't mean to call his memory into question, but like he was on a shitload of drugs.
That's true.
Like almost constantly. But so then, I feel like his reflections are probably, you know, if not made up, at least like totally fuzzy and warped and not accurate at all.
But then he does, you know, spend a lot of the early part of the book trying to convince you that his father was actually known as Spider, Lord of the Sunset Strip. Which I was like, come on, no. Like maybe his dad told him, like, they call me Spider, Lord of the Sunset Strip.
And it's just like, what did he do to earn that title? You know, like...
Oh, he climbed up a building.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, foreshadowing.
It's Lord of the Sunset Strip. Like, I mean, his dad was basically small-time coke and pot dealer who then turned into a kind of, bit player actor. It's it describes
Changed
him like in
his
these
name
clubs.
to Blackie.
Blackie, damn it, or Demet, or whatever.
I like Blackie, damn it, because that's just like. And then his son Anthony decided his stage name would be Cole, damn it.
And then he actually explains that joke for you, in case you couldn't get how he connected Cole and Blackie. It's
I can't believe I haven't even mentioned it yet too, but it takes exactly 3 pages into this book before he brings up the fact that his mother was part Mohawk, and he just discovered it recently, but it explains his lifelong obsession with Native American culture.
He has a lot of very vague, spiritual kind of things where he talks about. He has this one ridiculous passage where he talks about how he willed his own conception into happening, and then he writes the exact date that he was conceived on.
Yeah, it's weird.
No fucking way you could have done that.
Yeah.
Did he just take? He probably just. I mean, maybe he took his birthday and went back in the calendar 9 months and was like, oh, it had to have been then, or something. But he claims that he just willed himself into being.
Yeah,
from,
he says you could
realm.
choose your parentage by willing your conception into being. My mom is a Mohawk. That side of the family is Mohawk Indian, and I grew up I guess I was probably 8th or 9th grade when Blood Sugar Sex Magic came out, and I was definitely pretty into it because I played the bass, and you were saying, it's wow, this is really fucking good bass playing. This is pretty cool. But I remember my mom fucking absolutely going apeshit about angry about their videos and their imagery and stuff, and just being this is so fucking offensive, because around that point in time, for sure, they were trading pretty heavily in I mean, what people now would definitely call out as cultural appropriation,
Oh, yeah.
But back then it was Anthony Kiedis would have a
everybody.
war bonnet on in a video and shit like that, and that stuff would come on, and my mom would be she referred to them as Dreamcatcher rock a bunch, which I think that's pretty on point. But yeah, so I just it made me literally laugh out loud when it's 3 pages in that he's my mom, whose heritage was Irish, English, German, and recently discovered Mohawk. I was oh, shut the fuck up, dude. Seriously.
I mean, anyone can. I mean, the running joke in my family is that we're part Aboriginal Australian. And it's we have one ancestor from 200 or 300 years ago, and it doesn't matter. But we'd always be well, we're part Aborigine and stuff. But I mean, the playing the whole I'm part Native American card is just bizarre, especially because his sort of appreciate. It's almost like the Washington Redskins thing where it's no, I'm honoring their culture, and it's he has songs like "Fight Like a Brave" where it's
yeah, he does he does a fucking stereotypical war whoop in the middle of, and it's
bomb ba 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 rah!
Yeah, thanks, but
it's the sort of thing you'd see at Turner Field or when Florida State plays.
Yeah.
It's
No, I'm sure there's huge groups of Native American political associations gathered right now to talk about the wonderful tribute Anthony Kiedis pays them on a daily basis.
Oh, and he's got all the weird sort of faux Navajo tattoos that basically just look like the Seattle Seahawks logo.
Yeah,
that eagle kind of thing, totem pole thing.
He loves that shit, man. It's pretty uncomfortable, I think. Yeah, I don't know. They have all sorts of songs. Don't they have a song called "The Navajo Knows"? Was that them?
Something like that?
Or no?
Yeah.
Apache Rose Peacock. I know that's
right,
one of their songs. And God, there was something about a Navajo having sex, and I don't know, whatever. That's probably half of their catalog, actually.
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna need to give me more than just the song where they talk about sex.
The song where an Indian has sex by the Chili Peppers.
The two lyrical tropes that they fall back on the most are just graphic sexual nonsense, and then finding ways to rhyme words with the names of states or places.
Yeah. Now, at one point in the book too, Anthony even mentions is kind of one of his early lyrical epiphanies. He's once I even rhymed metropolis with acidophilus. Slow clap, dude. You're
It's a great show.
You're fucking on the path to greatness. We should probably take a break here in a second, but before we do, I actually wanted to ask you this question, because it seems like we're both kind of in the same boat here, where we, both respect this group musically, but kind of find them silly as well. At what point did you realize that the Chili Peppers were inherently hilarious?
I mean, I don't know. Like, I never really had like this sort of moment. Like I saw them at Lollapalooza 2006 back when I lived in Chicago, and I remember watching them and being really impressed with the musicianship, and because like it's very very few bands these days I feel like put their playing on display, because it's sort of seen as being like kind of dad rocky now.
Yeah.
But they actually and a lot of it and like a lot of just jammy shit just sounds awful. But they actually, I was really taken aback by how like great they were at just in like they were. This is when they still had Frusciante instead of the new guy they had, who's kind of shitty. But I was just like, wow, Anthony Kiedis is just the biggest, like, just ham. And then, like, I guess, like, I got older and I started listening to more stuff like The Band and, basically by the time I got to college, like, they were kind of like a sort of a jokey thing that we would, like, put on and kind of giggle about in the same way that, we used to, like, listen to, like, even shit like Creed and stuff when we would be drinking beer, because we're like, oh, man, like,
ironic.
When this shit was popular.
See, for me, I had a very sudden crystallization, I think, in that, like, I was never a huge fan of theirs, but I was definitely into them. But for me, the movie Beavis and Butthead Do America, they did a version of the Ohio Players' Love Roller Coaster for the soundtrack. And it happens at a scene when Beavis and Butthead first arrive in Las Vegas. And they go into a club, and there's a band playing the Chili Peppers version of Love Roller Coaster, but the band isn't drawn to look anything like the Chili Peppers at all. Like, they're drawn as like a Vegas lounge band. So the music has like Anthony Kiedis is singing and Flea's bass playing and stuff, but then the cartoon is like these old guys like in leisure suits with like chest hair hanging out and stuff, and the singer's like, ooh yeah, and like dancing around and stuff, and like they cut to the bass player and it's like the Flea bass line, but he's like this old guy in a leisure suit with like, like Ben Franklin hair and stuff. And it was like at that moment it just like clicked in my head. I was like, this music is like comedic, like it's funny, like when you take it away from the mental image that you had of the group at that point in time or whatever, it was just like, wow, this is really ridiculous, like nobody ever was like, man, this fucking Love Roller Coaster song is great, and it would be better if there was an obnoxious guitar solo and like some dude scat singing over it,
Oh, and like, I think he's gotten better in recent years at singing, but like at that point he still couldn't. I mean, throughout the book he talks about how he can't even sing Under the Bridge in key.
Yeah.
And that's his signature song.
It's like, motherfucker, that's your job. Like, learn to do your job well, at least,
track, dude.
No, the song Scar Tissue also has one of my favorite Anthony Kiedis moments, because like there's a chorus. It's actually like a pretty catchy song, and it's even though it's from the Coneheads movie soundtrack. But like the end of it, they play the chorus a few more times and he just starts improvising, and the lyrics are literally, I wrote this down, a ding a dong, a ding a ding dong, a ding diggy 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 dong ding dong. I don't ever wanna ding a ding dong, ding ding a dong, and then unintelligible.
He does that a lot.
Yeah. So anyway, we should probably take a break, and we'll be back in a little bit. Gosh, I'm laughing too hard about Anthony Kiedis. So hopefully you are as well, and we will join you in a few minutes.
Out on tour with the Smashing Pumpkins, nature kids. They don't have no function. I don't understand what they mean. I could really give a fuck.
All right, welcome back to I Don't Even Own a Television. I am J.W. Friedman. With me still is Ben Firke.
Hello. How's everyone?
Hey there. And hey to all of you. Thank you for listening to us discuss the Red Hot Chili Peppers and Anthony Kiedis' Scar Tissue. I should mention, just a second ago, I was talking about and quoting from a song that I said was Scar Tissue, and I realized when we were taking a little break here, it's actually called Soul to Squeeze. So don't send me any shitty, angry emails about it, all of you pepperheads.
Because this is actually something that one of my best friends from college, JR, consider this your shout out, buddy, he was a high school football player, and he in the last game of his high school football career, he got injured during the middle of their rivalry, his high school's rivalry game, and it's one of the oldest rivalry games in the country. It's played on Thanksgiving Day, and he was obviously incredibly upset. And he talked about what got him through it was he was driving home with his ankle all taped up, and "Soul to Squeeze" came on the radio, and it was and so we would kind of play it. And it's like, yeah, this song's good. This is like a good kind of mellow track. And so I listened to it again, sort of in preparation for this, and that scat part at the end, I'm like, oh my god, he did it again. Like, even when he writes a song that has some degree of like emotional resonance, he just can't help but still be Anthony Kiedis and ruin it with a bunch of terrible nonsense syllables.
That's the song I was talking about earlier, where it's a really nice, catchy song, and then at the end he's all like a ding a dong a ding a ding dong dong a ding ding a come on ding dong, and like I'm not doing a bad imitation. Those are the words to the song. Like, it's like Anthony Kiedis doing an Anthony Kiedis impression. But yeah, so I definitely wanted to rectify that mistake before I never heard the end of it, because I'm sure the Venn diagram of hardcore Chili Peppers fans and book podcast listeners has a ton of overlap. But yeah, so just a couple more things before we kind of get into the games and segments here. I took a lot of notes reading this, and I needed to do some cleanup because there's some things that we didn't mention that I feel like we'd be remiss if we, ended the podcast without at least paying a bit of service to them. Yeah. So, you talked earlier about name dropping. My favorite name drop that happened in this book is someone who I've never heard of before, who may or may not have existed, but was a Latino friend of Anthony Kiedis named Carlos Guitarlos.
Carlos Guitarlos. What an incredible stage name that is.
Yeah, I'm sure that wasn't a real name, but it was great. Carlos Guitarlos. He also, at one point in the book, when he meets the Smashing Pumpkins, he talks about Darcy from Smashing Pumpkins getting hammered on whippets, but it's spelled like the dog. And it's the best typo ever, because I just had this image of like Darcy from Smashing Pumpkins like in a pile of like whippet puppies. Like, I don't know. I'm really cool. Sorry.
I can imagine. I can definitely imagine her being into that, because I think she became a farmer or something after she quit the band. So maybe she had a puppy farm.
Yes, I'm
getting high on whippets all day.
Just getting hammered on whippets. I don't know. It made me laugh so hard. And okay, this is the last one, but I thought this was great. Keidis hates Andy Gill from Gang of Four.
What the fuck, too? Because, if you read, this is super... I'm going to really show my music geek feathers. Flea wrote the liner notes to, the 25th or whatever anniversary reissue of Entertainment by Gang of Four, which, by the way, stone cold classic album, really is, what the only real antecedent to, the Chili Peppers...
Please stay for
from,
evenings and weekends.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Flea writes the liner notes, and all he does is talk about how great Andy Gill is... And he actually shits-talk the Edge because he accuses the Edge of stealing from Andy Gill and not giving him due credit. Flea just goes down on Andy Gill for 4 paragraphs in this little mini essay, and it's just it was so weird how Anthony just hated him, and all this guy was really trying to do was just make an album that sounded good with a bunch of morons who had no idea what they were doing in the studio.
Yeah, we're fucking whacked out on junk. Yeah, they were all hopped up on goofballs. All right, anyway. But yeah, the thing that I loved was this quote where Andy Gill was trying to get their guitar player to change his sound and kept, quote-unquote, trying to carve the edges off the guitar sound. And Anthony said that he would get really mad and yell, "That's weak and it's lame, and this song is punk rock and it's got to be thrashing and hard."
Yeah.
Which, that right there is a great album title if you have a math rock band. You're like, what are we going to call this album? That's weak and it's lame, and this song is punk rock, and it's got to be thrashing and hard. Just take that shit to the bank right now. That was amazing. Like, I want to get a tattoo of that when I read that. So. Okay. But yeah, so anyway, one thing we do here on I Don't Even Own a Television is we play games because we're crazy and sometimes dive from tall buildings into swimming pools, but not really. Anthony Keidis is back doing that, so hopefully...
And in what I consider their best song, he actually mentions that, minus the breaking his back part.
Does he go, digga digga dive it up from a building and I broke my back? All right,
thankfully he doesn't. He just says, but what's confusing is that he, it's called Deep Kick, by the way, and it's sort of like their Bohemian Rhapsody because it has this sort of like beginning, middle, end parts that are all different.
Oh, they're movements.
They're movements. It's a Dave Navarro era song too, so it sounds a little bit different. But he's like, the line's like, we went to Fairfax High School, jumped off buildings into their pools. And it's totally off key, by the way, but like, for the longest time,
like I can totally imagine it though.
For the longest time, I was like, I was confused. I'm like, so wait, so there was a pool at your high school, and you jumped off the roof and you landed in the fucking pool? And like, I actually visited LA once. I walked by Fairfax High School, and I was just like, I don't see any signs for a pool here. So like that. Obviously, he just mangled the syntax or whatever that line was, you know.
But you got to make it work when you're like. It's like Sly Stallone singing The Hustle. At least that's what my imitation sounded like. Cool.
His flow is like the Beastie Boys on roids, because like the Beastie Boys always had that kind of
the Beastie Boys on roids.
It's like roid rage, and it's just like the amped up, varsity soccer team version of the Beastie Boys, because like all Beastie Boys songs more or less have the same kind of da 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 da, and they all kind of yell the da part, and then just Anthony does the same like thing. Only it's just twice as loud.
It sounds like a soccer chant. Yeah. He also has, I don't know how to describe it, but there's like this inherent goofy comic book character quality to his angry voice that's like, it's really hard to put into words. It's kind of easy to imitate if you try hard enough, but he's always like, like,
he's just such a doofus.
A doofus, exactly. All right, but anyway.
Yeah,
we are running super late here, so I think we gotta get into the good stuff.
Yeah.
What the people came for, as Anthony Keidis would encourage us to do. And we have a segment here on I Don't Even Own a Television that is very popular for some unknown reason, and it is called Dramatic Reading.
Dramatic readings. We're gonna make it sound important. Dramatic readings. Yeah, I got some words for you.
Okay, so in Dramatic Readings, we take a segment from the book in hand, and read from it and try to make it sound really, really important, which isn't hard to do because of the tone of this book, actually. So, would you like to go first, or should I?
If you would like to go first,
Okay, I will.
Yes.
I have to admit that this section that I'm going to be doing here is mostly song lyrics, because I feel like it definitely captures the spirit of the band. But I'll definitely preface it with the paragraph that precedes, where he's talking about why this is such a great song. Sorry, I can't even keep a straight face and do this. So,
Yeah.
All right. So, meanwhile, we were continually expanding our own canon of songs. One of the early songs we wrote in the Leyland Way house was Green Heaven. I'd been reading a lot of books about whales and dolphins, and I had always been acutely aware of social injustice. In LA in the early 80s, the police department was rife with corruption, so I started writing a song that would contrast life above the sea and life below the sea, chronicling the excesses of the Reagan years and comparing them to this idyllic Shangri-La that was happening below sea level, with animals that I considered to be of equal brain power. From Green Heaven by Anthony Keidis. Here above land, man has made his plan, and yes, it does include the Ku Klux Klan. We got a government so twisted and bent, bombs, tanks, and guns, how our money is spent. Time now to take you to a different place where peace loving whales flow through liquid outer space, grooving and grabbing as graceful as lace, never losing touch with the ocean's embrace. Back to the land of the policeman's, where he does whatever he says he can, including hating you cause you're a Jew, or beating black ass, that's nothing new. Alright, sorry.
Oh my god.
I just love the contrast of his description of the song and then what it is. So yeah, sorry if that got loud to everyone at home in their headphones, but you should be warned, this podcast is fully rock and roll. So.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so yeah, now it's your turn. Follow that.
Oh god, it's like, I have to like compose myself, you know.
Okay.
As a person who writes plays, I should be far more professional about a dramatic reading. So here we go. Okay, this is basically from Anthony Keidis keeps on relapsing in the 90s after he'd been clean for like 5 or 6 years, and what he does is he will do a shitload of heroin and then fly to Cabo San Lucas and then just kind of detox for a little while and like rinse, repeat, just do that over and over. So I had booked a room at the Westin, a modern hotel that had been designed to look like a red clay Mexican structure. I holed up in bed, used the last of the heroin, and then cocooned, ordering room service and watching satellite TV and feeling lonely and depressed and remorseful. By the third day of lying in bed, eating, and trying to become human again, I forced myself to go down and jump in the ocean. I had to baptize my spirit. I went to the pool area and tried to swim, but I ran into people who wanted to talk to me, and I wasn't up for that at all. On the trip, I made friends with a pelican whose wing had been damaged in a fisherman's net. He had become the mascot of the pool area. I sat there and fed him and talked to him. We were two creatures, nursing our wounds. I even wound up writing a song about that pelican.
Would that be the Insane Clown Posse hit Miracles? Because I believe that also has some touching pelican moments.
Yeah, they see a pelican and they say it ran away, which it almost certainly did not. It's a bird.
It eats a cell phone and then runs away, yeah. I believe. Maybe it was the same bird.
I mean, when I read that passage, it really stuck out to me just because the image of just Anthony Kiedis just sitting at a pool, like feeding and just talking to a pelican that's just sitting, that's like just staring at him blankly. I assume, just if it could fly away, it would have. It's just
like let me go. just also in my mind, like Anthony Kiedis. Probably as a product of my age, but in my mind, Anthony Keidis is always wearing jeans with like a shit ton of holes in them and like Chuck Taylors and like a Vision Streetwear tank top. So that makes the visual even better.
Oh, yeah. And then I remember I was reading this with my, like in the same room as my roommate, and I was like, I wonder what song that is. And then I was like, wait a minute. The chorus of Scar Tissue is, with the birds I sing. It's like, with the birds, whatever. And I was like, oh my god, what if it's about the pelican? And I was so disappointed to find out that it wasn't about the pelican, but it was actually about a bunch of seagulls that Anthony Kiedis looks at while the Chili Peppers are jamming in Flea's garage. And he has like another hilarious bit where he talks about, bonding with these birds. And, I feel like the only other author with the same sort of relationship to birds that I can think of is Jonathan Franzen at this point, because he just Anthony Kiedis loves birds.
Yeah, he does. They make him feel free. Anthony Kiedis cherishes his freedom for sure. He also he's very, very, very into telling you about the spiritual power of music.
Oh my god. Yeah, he just would not shut up about it. Like when except for when he's talking about sex and drugs, of course, which are.
That's the third, the second and third part of the Scar Tissue Trinity. Okay, so yeah, let's move on here. I only have one more segment prepared, but I think this is a good one. So get ready for What Would They Do?
Sometimes the tensions are hard to divine, and others the clear as day. So tell me, what would they do?
Okay, so in this segment, What Would They Do? Normally, I present a situation and ask what a character from the book would do. Right now, though, this is What Would They Do Redux, because the question is assumed, and it's, what lyrics would Anthony Kiedis write about blank? So what I'd like you to do, and don't worry, you'll get to pick one for me after this too, but just give me a couple lines of some improvised Anthony Kiedis lyrics about dinosaurs.
Oh man, I'm the worst at improv. Let me think of just dinosaurs. Like I guess like I would be something like, take it back to the Stone Age, call me T-Rex, screaming, like you'll head for the hills when you see my sex.
There you go. That was actually pretty good. I could hear that.
It's an honor to come from such an esteemed rhymesmith as yourself. Just
okay.
God, what? All right. So I now need to do one for you.
Yeah. Just pick something, and I'm gonna do an Anthony Kiedis.
What would I guess like what would Anthony Kiedis rap about if he was giving a commencement speech to a high school? Like if he's gonna rap the whole thing. Like
okay. So I'm just gonna keep this short, but I think it would sound something like this. It's been a long time and you worked real hard. Now there's a monster out in your yard. It's Anthony Kiedis. I've got the funk. So work real hard. Don't be a punk. That was great. I'm a master. Me and Anthony, by the way, Keidis. Me and you, bud. Let's do some tracks.
You guys really should start just a rap beef, because the one song I always wish the Chili Peppers wrote was some sort of diss track or something. Like they should have done a Faith No More diss if they really did have that rivalry.
Mike Patton's got curly hair. Yeah, you got girly hair. Blinga bling blong.
Faith No More.
Dear.
Your mom's a whore.
It would totally, definitely have something like that.
There's no simple rhyme that he hasn't made yet.
Yeah, definitely. If there's a guy that has a notebook with several pages that have like the glad, sad, mad, bad trifecta going on, it's Keidis. Like, there's a whole lot of like, girl, you made me mad. It was bad. Then I got sad. You were the best I had.
I feel like when he wrote Californication, he must have just had a rhyming dictionary and just like opened it to the Asian part.
Creation. About to dual shock the world like a PlayStation.
Oh, that's great. That should have been in there. That should have been...
Oh, God, the light bulb. Bling! I'm like, sorry. Okay, yeah, this is getting very esoteric, and I think it's probably about time to close things down here. But before we go, I wanted to go ahead and give our listeners the opportunity to maybe experience a good book instead of this. So what would you recommend to people? And it doesn't have to have anything to do with Red Hot Chili Peppers or Anthony Kiedis, but, what's a good thing to read?
Okay, I mean, like, if I may, because I'm a playwright, and I'm by no means, like, super big or anything, I'm working on it, but I think that just sort of adds, so I'm a little biased here, but I feel like people don't really read drama anymore, and I think that kind of sucks, because there's a lot of really good, really thoughtful stuff going on. So I would recommend that, you read something by Annie Baker. She has this collection of 4 plays called the Vermont Plays, and, a lot of people, I think, think of theater and drama as being like really stuffy for like all these like old, drawing room kind of comedies that only your grandparents go to, or it's just really abstract and experimental. But Annie Baker writes plays about, just like people just sort of chilling in Vermont, and, like a guy who, wants to be a writer, and a guy who, is a shitty folk singer, and they make friends with the barista, and it's just that's the place called The Aliens, by the way, and it's very funny, it's very moving, you'll laugh, you'll cry. There's some weird shit in it, but it's written in language that's really accessible, and it's almost like poetic, even though it's a lot of just sort of sort of stuff. So I definitely would recommend it. You read Annie Baker, Amy Herzog's good, Will Eno's good. Just read a fucking play, man. Like there's good stuff out there.
No, that's awesome. Like that's definitely a huge gap in my my knowledge when it comes to just things that are fun to read, and I do know that I should get more into it. So those are actually awesome suggestions.
Yeah, and she also just won the Pulitzer Prize for drama for a play called The Flick, which is I actually got to see it in previews in New York, and it's phenomenal. It's about a bunch. It's like three people who work in a movie theater, and they banter about movies a lot, and it's also very touching and very funny. And if you're like a movie buff, then there's a lot of stuff in it that you would probably like, and just sort of it's even about like the day-to-day running of a movie theater. That's pretty nice. So that's
cool.
Yeah, there's a Pulp Fiction segment. It's pretty fun.
Awesome. So I'm going to take things down a notch here, I guess, because I'm bringing it back to musician autobiographies. But I would definitely recommend the real Frank Zappa book, which is written by Frank Zappa, and I believe there's a guest writer, ghostwriter, whatever. But I think
which is very open about too.
Yeah, he is. And I think it works very well as kind of a contrast to this because it's somebody who's incredibly self-aware about, the things that he's done and the transformations that he had made over the years prior to publishing, the book. And plus, I think it does something that a lot of pop culture biographies could learn from in that it's presented as a very... more like a compendium of short vignettes. It's not a long-form memoir. It's more like, here's a bunch of funny stories about my childhood. Here's a bunch of funny stories about this time I was on the road in Hamburg and fucking the concert hall we were playing in caught fire.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's great. Even if you're not a fan of Frank Zappa's music, which honestly I'm not incredibly, I think it's...
He's got some good stuff, but I think a lot of it is just too cerebral. But yeah,
I respect him a ton. I like some of his songs. I definitely would not call myself a huge fan, but I think the book is worth picking up, especially if you're just kind of... It's pretty rare to read the words of a musician who had pop success to an extent that's still very kind of... I don't want to say down to earth because he's a weirdo, but he's really realistic about what the influence of what he did actually is. And I think it works as a good contrast to Anthony Kiedis, who kind of thought he was changing the world by writing a song about how dolphins are better than cops. So. Okay, so before we go, I just wanted to give you the chance here to go ahead and plug anything. If there's anything you're working on you want people to check out, or how people can keep in touch with you, etc.
Thank you. I really appreciate this. So, first of all, I just want to wish happy birthday to my mother and my sister, who had both of their birthdays this week. And I'm sorry that my birthday shout-out has to come in a podcast where I talk about, the song called Party on Your Pussy, among other things. But, I love you, Mom. I love you, sis.
I apologize, too. I'm sorry. I had no idea.
No, my mom's cool. She's not gonna be
okay.
Cool. And so, I'm a playwright, and I don't really have anything immediate coming up. I actually have to get to work revising this short Western script that's due tomorrow. And in a few days, I'll know whether that's going up or not. But so just follow me on Twitter at my handle's at Nerve Center CT, and it's basically it's not really like my real personality. It's sort of I just do hot takes on pretty much everything.
Hot takes, rack them.
I'll if this play ends up getting picked up, or this other longer thing that I have in the works ends up getting picked up, that's where you'll know about it. And I'd also like to plug the theater company I'm involved with called The Shelter. It's based out of New York. You can learn about it at theshelternyc.org. And what's cool about us is that there's an open door policy, and so really you get out of it what you put into it. And there's always so just go to the website if you want to learn more about it. And it's a fun group of people. And if you do theater stuff, stop by. And you live in New York too, because that's where it is.
Super cool. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and also thank you for sacrificing a week of your life to read Anthony Kiedis' inner dialogue.
I mean, well, it was actually kind of fun because I spent the whole week kind of going back and listening to the old hits, and it was nice to be like, wow, my opinion is right. They really are a great band that is just sabotaged by this one idiot bro guy.
And he's the dude who got the book contract. So there you go.
Although I did find out Flea's got a book. Flea's writing a book.
Oh shit. Okay, yeah. So maybe we'll have to talk again at a later date.
Oh my god!
About the Flea biography.
I'm buying it the minute it comes out.
All right, but for now, to the folks at home, if you'd like to get in touch with me, it's I don't even own a television at gmail.com. Please visit us at idon'tevenowntelevision.com. You can follow us on Facebook or Twitter from the links there. Make sure to subscribe on iTunes if you aren't already. If you use Stitcher, subscribe on Stitcher, etc., etc. Thank you so much for all of your support, and we will be back shortly with another book that will make your eyes bug out of your head, but probably not quite as much as this one did, because I was going to make an Anthony Kiedis joke like about bug eyes and stuff, and then I realized he doesn't really have them, so never mind. I was thinking of someone else. Okay, cool. So thanks again for being here.
Thank you. I really appreciate you having me. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, me too. And to everyone at home, keep reading crap. Bye.